Yeah, I don't even know where the camera's there. Okay. Hello. Yes. Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to Lighthouse Bookshop's beautiful garden. Thank you so much for joining us in person or online. I am so happy, so delighted to be joined by Dr. Samara Linton and Rianna Walcott to celebrate the colour of madness. This is such a beautiful book, a collection of like beautiful just stories and experiences in this updated version. And yeah, I just can't wait to get chatting to you both. We'll have a little chat and then we'll come to the audience for questions. So if you have a question, please hold it for the end. And of course, don't forget to buy the book, and Rianna and Samara will be signing it afterwards as well. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Yeah. Okay, perfect. I feel like I'm shouting into this microphone as well. So I'll do my best. Thank you so much. How are you both? Yeah, we're good. Yeah, pretty good. Good. It's nice to be in Edinburgh in the sun. This version is kind of like, I suppose, in a sense, an unexpected addition. I suppose. How does it feel?
Yeah, it feels really good to be given. Is this on?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, it feels really good to be given the opportunity to give this book, I guess, a rebirth, to give our contributors the opportunity to reflect on the pieces they did the first time round, to, I guess, extend and continue the journey they started in 2018 with the first edition, for us as editors to also, I guess, impart our own insights, our own experience, our own maturity to the book as well, and then welcome new contributors too. So it's been a lot of fun this time around, actually.
I think we're still so proud of the first version of it, but I think to me this one feels like it's got a bit more of a sheen to it. It's a little bit. It's got a nice sound of it. I love the first cover too. Of course, no shade to it, but this one's got. It's just like a really complete book. It feels really. I don't know. It's definitely got a maturity to it. Yeah, the other one was very much like. I think reflected the age that Samara and I were at, and also a lot of our contributors were younger, and it's being able to keep with the same people and ask them to reflect on their journeys 2 years on after so much has happened in the world. It's been a really great opportunity.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really special, even though it came about from unfortunate or unexpected circumstances. This is like the best thing ever to come from that, I think.
Best thing she did for us, yeah.
Well, I won't say thank you. Do you think, you maybe touched on it slightly, that you're older now. It was 2018 that first edition came out. But how do you think you've changed as editors, and how is your approach, or did your approach to this version change?
I think in 2018, I think there's obviously the fact that we were both quite inexperienced. It was our first time putting together a book of any sort, actually. And we mostly just, I guess, drew on our own values and what we kind of instinctively knew that we wanted to do. We knew we wanted this book to be collaborative. We knew we wanted it to be representative of the kind of diverse range of people and experiences and cultures that exist under the umbrella of BAME or POC. We knew we wanted it to challenge the whitewashed narrative of mental health that we were both really sick of continuously seeing, and we were sick of not seeing ourselves reflected in the mental health narratives and research and stories that we saw around us. So I think we kind of did a lot of those things based on instinct and just our own lived experience. And I think, Rianna, you can touch on this a bit more, but one of the things that we are doing now is that we're still drawing from that lived experience and that instinct, but we're also drawing from research that we've done and advocacy and work with communities. We both have, in the last few years, really done a lot more in our fields. And I think we bring with us that wealth of knowledge and experience as well to this book. And I think that kind of gives it, I guess, the added benefit of having that insight and being able to make it even more of a powerful resource than it was the first time round.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mean, even in the simple fact that since the first one, Samara's written another book. Well done. So like that's the kind of thing that makes you, a better editor. Like we both were at the start and end of different careers at the point that we started, and just have done so many different things. Like, so Samara mentioned some of the advocacy work that we managed to do as a result of the last edition. So a lot of in the case of Samara, obviously doctor, so like very much was on the side of the practitioner side of things when we were initially doing that book, but a young doctor, a junior doctor. And at that point, I had only really experienced things from the service user perspective, which of course, as we care about in this book, is a very valid and important perspective as well. But at this point now, I'm also, consider myself a service user, but also an advocate. Yeah. So some of the groups that Samara had mentioned that we've worked with since that time, we've worked with Nightline, the volunteering student organisation, and on making their service more accessible. We've been part of numerous research studies at this point, so we've done so many things with the book that at this point it was so much easier to do that work, to continue with it. It was more like we'd had all this time to sit with it, all this time to work with it, and had been continuously referring to it and using it in the last 4 years, that it was just so natural to go back and be like, okay, so now let's fix this, this, and this, because we've spent it never left us. It was never a project that we just put down. It was always something that was part of something bigger anyway.
Yeah, I think that's really special and speaks to the book as well, right? That it wasn't just something you created in that moment and put it out into the world and then in a sense walked away. Like the fact that you've kept it, and it also is a testament to what an incredible resource it is, right? As well, that people are coming to you, you're going to people and you're like, look, these are the experiences, this is what's going on. That's so special. Do you think, and you'll know as well, like from the kind of work you've been doing, that how has, if it has, our kind of response or just general thinking or ideas around mental health for people of colour, Black people and people of colour, changed, do you think, since when the book first came out and now?
I guess there are, we've seen more conversation, I think, about some of the things that we've been talking about for decades as people of colour in the UK, but that conversation and kind of reaching the mainstream more so in 2020, and even institutions, so people who are quote unquote impartial, actually bringing this conversation to light. So I think that's positive. It gives you an opportunity to kind of bring the work that you've been doing and the work that others have been doing to the fore. We've seen, people like Nadia Hussain, David Hayward, being given spots on like BBC One to talk about their mental health experiences, and that being broadcast to the entire nation and beyond. And that kind of level of exposure we haven't really seen much in recent years. And that's, I'm thinking particularly of even Nadia Hussain. She talked very openly about her experience of racism growing up and how that impacted her. And her development of anxiety. David Hayward, was a black man who had psychosis and was pinned down by multiple officers. And, that's something that, mental health campaigners and Black community groups have been talking about for decades. And having that in the mainstream, I think, was really important and really powerful. But then at the same time, we recently had a report that said there's no institutional racism in the UK. And, we've also seen the rise and the continued rise of many, how do you want to say, I guess, white supremacist groups. We've seen, there's no way to sugarcoat it, really. We've seen increasingly attacks on marginalized people in many areas of society. There's a lot more polarization. So I don't know. I don't think necessarily I would say things have gotten better or worse. I just think the conversation has evolved, and I think this book has evolved alongside it.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. Yeah. And thinking of that as well, I think I found it I'm intrigued as well. I know this isn't like a put you on the spot question, but because the title's changed a little bit. Yeah, I'll ask that first. Why did you choose the title a little bit?
Oh yeah. It was just Colour of Madness, BAME mental health in the UK.
Yeah.
And now it's same Colour of Madness, mental health in Technicolor. And so like why?
Yeah, why?
Well, part of it was wanting to give the book a fresh feel, like to, you know, the same way that we had to change the cover and all sorts of things. You know, you want to make sure that it feels revised, but also it was sort of marked like maybe a revision in our thinking as well.
Yeah.
It's not to say that that terms such as BAME and POC don't have their political use, because they do. But I think we didn't want to constrain our contributors to identify under either umbrella if they didn't so choose.
Okay.
So we thought that like by giving it something completely unrelated, by saying that we are just looking at the full range of experience. We use lots of words like we were constantly saying kaleidoscopic and technicolor and blah blah, all those drawing from that kind of conceit. And that's just because, I mean, I never refer to myself as a BAME person or a person of color, like unless I'm doing it to get funding.
Yeah.
But
yeah, like, give me money, I'm BAME.
Exactly. Like, But other than that, like I'm a Black woman, and that's very, very important to my experience. And I just didn't, we didn't feel like we wanted to choose one and then not have people feel that it fit. Yeah. And like actually, like the reason why we settled on BAME in the first place is because we did have a focus group, I guess you call it. So when we first started thinking about, when we first started the first edition, we put together a group of, was it like 100 people? Yeah, on Facebook. People of color, women of color in general. It just so happened to be that, just tended to be the ones who were, on their ship. So, we put together this group, and we were kind of like asking, like, what we sort of thought through some names, thought through some subtitles, asked people how they preferred to identify, and overwhelmingly it was BAME was the choice but it was like even clear at the time that it was like, if we must, let's go for BAME. Okay. And we wanted to respect that feeling of, I guess, Yeah. Because I think, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things with BAME, which we addressed in the introduction of the first edition, was that we knew that was the term that was being used by government. And we wanted this book to be able to speak to those powers that be. And we acknowledged in the introduction that, this term is contentious, it's so problematic, even just, organizing ourselves against whiteness, it's already problematic. And, there's going to be countless issues with it. But we knew that we thought that if we use this term, this is something that we can then use to inform, hopefully, policy and those powers those powers that be. And this time around, we still say race, which again, we can have many a debate about that term. But I think we're trying to use the language that is being used in the spaces that we want to change.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that was a good choice. I like this title a little bit more, I can't lie. Yeah, I really like it. I think it's beautiful. Thinking, about the contributors as well, the many contributors to this book. I feel like there's 100, but I definitely think that's not true. Okay,
we have a really hard time of cutting the book down and excluding contributors.
Yeah, you've added to it. I opened up because I've got the first edition. I was like, there's more in here. You've added more.
But I think before you ask your question, I think it speaks to the fact that there are so many experiences that have not been given the platform they deserve. And it's so hard for us to then say, look, we know this experience has barely been platformed, it's barely been highlighted, but we've got limited space, so we're going to have to cut it. We really struggled because we felt that actually every single piece in this book needed to be here. Yeah. And we needed probably 10 times the number of contributors that are in this book. Yeah. Obviously there's restraints and our publishers wouldn't like that very much. But I think the difficulty speaks to the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's not at all a bad thing. Every single one is so different, right? And makes you and speaks to a different part, or like spoke to a different part to me, or like was felt in a different way that I wasn't expecting, which yeah. Why did you decide to ask your contributors, some of your contributors from the first edition, or maybe all of them, to up to write a postscript? And what was their response to that?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. Well, initially we just thought, okay, people can have the opportunity to update their work. Things change, people's language change, how they identify changes, their experiences change, and they might not necessarily identify with the person they were in 2018. So we kind of gave people that very basic opportunity. And then I think the idea of the postscript came from the acknowledgement that in revisiting this book, it was a moment of reflection and an opportunity for reflection. And we wanted to give all of our contributors that opportunity to reflect if they so desired. So every single one of our contributors, we told them, let us know if you want to make any revisions to your piece. For artwork, we said if you want to submit another piece, because you can't really revise your artwork as easily. Some did. And we said, and if you want to write a postscript and afterward, reflecting on the last 2 years. And as you see, like the vast majority had something to say about their journey over the last few years. And I can't even imagine what this book would have been like had we not given them that opportunity.
Definitely. I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I think some of them are the most, like almost the best, like some of it is like one of the best parts of reading it. Like, especially when, I don't know, I think part of it, just as like from a personal perspective, as editors who've worked with these contributors, and some of this book is writing from a deep place of grief. Some of this book is writing from and I think one of the lovely things that personally that I found was having people who were maybe at the start of their journey and getting like accreditation in their journey to becoming like practitioners, or people who were in a really sticky like a difficult time, and then have come back and gone 4 years, have gone, I'm still here, I'm okay. And like obviously that's not the case with everyone, but like being able to give people the opportunity to revisit that good and bad, like we're in different places to where we were 4 years ago. Like, why wouldn't we? We've had the opportunity to update our introduction and conclusion. Yeah, exactly. So like everyone else does that. Like, it's all part of understanding this book as like completely a collaborative process. Like, it's not about us. So if we're getting the opportunity, so should everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it felt like, right? And it felt like it really highlighted this collaborative process, and that every single person has put a little bit of themselves into this book. And to read the contributors come back and see where they're at now was really nice. Contributors again, why did you decide to include artwork? Like, what was the reason for that? Because I think a lot of people would just expect, like stories, experiences, and poems. So.
Well, we didn't want to constrain the book really in any way. Our brief was so broad. It was like, write us something. Even when it came to the postscripts, I mean, this probably isn't like amazing for the publishers as well, but we were just like, people were asking us for a word count. We were like, do what you got to do. Like, we'll figure it out. I think there was like one piece that we had to cut significantly, but everything else barely. People just really wanted to give that opportunity for people to say exactly what they wanted to say, because when you're talking about things that are so personal, we learned the first time round that we had to edit with a light touch. Okay. Because the first time, like, bearing in mind, Samara and I are both coming, like, I have literature degrees, and, Samara is a journalist, and so we're coming from like careers where we are used to making our work legible to a white gaze.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And we kind of approached the first edition doing that, not like right from the jump, it was a lot of like, oh, we've got to tidy up some vernacular, we've got to cut this, we've got to trim this, blah, blah, blah. And we had an experience with a few pieces where people were like, can you actually put that back? Because I don't speak like that. And this is how I want it to look. And I care about how it looks on the page. And we just immediately learned from that and have never gone back. Like, we are as light touch as possible with this, because this isn't just any old thing. These are people, this is people's lives that they're pouring out, whether it's a short story or not. So whenever someone chose to put whatever they put in, we try really hard to like accommodate that. So when it comes to the art, that also reflects the fact that in terms of like mental health services and you know, the coping mechanisms that people have to deal with their mental health, art is a huge factor. If we could have recorded some songs in there and people put people's songwriters in, we would have, you know, anything that people do, like that's what belongs in there. And like, especially when it comes to, you know, it didn't even matter to us necessarily if people were like illustrators by trade or whatever. You know, we've got stuff where people have taken pictures of collages or, you know, done sketches and had to post them to us and we've scanned it in, or there's pictures of sculptures in there, you know, like it's just like, I think by combining the visual and the written, like we've done the best we can to include everything that people do, you know, all of the ways that people express their feelings about their mental health. Yeah, best we could do.
And just to add, one of the conversations we had really early on, again, going back to the fact that, you know, we both recognize our privileges and our positions as university educated, blah, 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 blah. And books can be incredibly inaccessible for huge numbers of people, especially people of color with mental health issues. And we wanted this book to be as accessible to as many groups of people as possible. And so, you know, there are lengthy essays in here, you know, written by academics, but there are also short poems, and there are also, like we discussed, artwork. And a part of that patchwork approach was we wanted there to be something in this book for everyone, regardless of where their mental state was at that particular moment in time, regardless of their background, regardless of, you know, their grasp of English. We wanted people to be able to engage with this book, because too often things that are about us are not for us. And we wanted this to be both, you know, about us and for us and by us. And I think the artwork, which, you know, Rianna really pushed for and, you know, continues to push for, and you didn't really mention that, but, you know, it was really important to you because art in many ways can be one of the most accessible forms of expression, and especially visual artwork. And it was part of that commitment to accessibility and inclusivity.
Yeah.
Can I just add one last thing about that?
Of course you can.
Yeah, I think the way that we designed the book as well, I just want to talk a little bit about the layout aspect, because in terms of thinking about people being able to take what they need from it, thank you, heads up. In terms of thinking about people being able to take what they need from it, you can dip in and out of this book, you know, like we've got it separated into the visible light spectrum, colors of the rainbow, and each, do you want to do the bit where you say what each one's for? Because you're better at it than me.
Yeah, I want one of you to do the bit. I'm so excited. Please.
Okay, it's easier actually just to read what we wrote. So I'm going to paraphrase it. No, don't worry, I'll paraphrase it. So, the color of madness. If you remember from school, there are 7 colors of the rainbow. Richard of York gave battle in vain. And we kind of decided, because we kind of went off the idea that, you know, human emotion, human experience, there's a spectrum of experiences, and the light spectrum, blah, blah, blah. It's very clever. And so we kind of went with the idea of like red was where we kind of collected all of the pieces that were to do with rage and passion and resilience. Orange, we went with kind of overwhelming thoughts and anxiety and mania. Yellow is about hope. And green, we did about familial ties and relationships. Blue for how we interact with institutions, from clinical relationships and mental health institutions to kind of bigger institutions like the Home Office and immigration and government. Indigo, about depression and melancholy. And then violet is about experiences that are outside of what we would traditionally think of as reality. So psychosis and kind of spiritual experiences. And then in the middle of the book, we've got polychrome for all of our artwork. So even in the way we thought about structuring the book and organizing the book, we wanted to capture that full spectrum of experience. And it meant that you can hopefully dip in and out of the chapters based on kind of what you're hoping to find and hoping to engage with in that moment as well.
Yeah, I'm like, don't show people too much. They need to buy it. Like, it's the pictures. Yeah, and I think that's such a beautiful job you've done as editors, right? And like creating these spaces and those pieces and collecting them in that way. That's really lovely. Before we go to the audience for any questions, I kind of wanted to ask you both, what do you see as the future of this version, or this? What are your hopes for this Technicolor version?
An audiobook.
Yes,
That's a hope. That's a hope. Just because, again, it allows for an extra layer of accessibility, and that's what we're about. So it's important to us.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I mean, the thing about it is, it's a wonderful question to be asked, because we've already done so much more than we thought we could in the first place, that it feels like anything else is a bonus, you know? I definitely hope that it gets what it deserves, in that the contributors get to see their work in a way that, you know, that they get to have the whole publishing experience, you know, because Samara and I have had such a nice experience this time. Like, you know, not to be all like weepy about it, but like, it's been so lovely. You know, we've been supported so nicely and treated so well. And like, I think now that this has happened, we've been able to look back and go, wow, we really kind of did a lot more than we thought. We did more than we were supposed to, and we didn't know we were doing more than we were supposed to. And like, just an example of this is like, one time we were thinking, one of the comments we wanted to take on board after the first edition was that we wanted, again, an index. Another thing about being able to dip in and out, being able to, you know, find the book as an accessible piece that you can pick up and put down. And when we thought, yeah, we've got to have an index this time, we sat down and we were like, okay, let's budget for this. Maybe we can hire someone to do it. Maybe we can find the time to do it ourselves. And, you know, like, immediately started going straight to like, how do we make this happen? And then we just went, do you think that's something we could maybe ask the publishers to do? And they went, yeah, obviously we'll do an index. And we were like, oh my God. You know, like, just in that one conversation, days and hours of work and hundreds of pounds just went, whoosh, it's all right, return to our like minds and pockets. And like, you know, just, you know, being able to have that experience and being able to like see what it's actually about is something that we think that our contributors really like deserve to see the back end of as well. Yeah, like, we want them to be able to walk into a bookshop and see it and go, ah, that's my book, and not like worrying about like, it being out of stock and stuff like that. But also beyond that, like, I just think that I really hope that this time not this time, like, this is just a hope for it. Like, it's such a beautiful book, and I'm allowed to say that because I edited it. And like, you know, I just think that so much of the poetry, so much of the art, like, you read it and you go, wow, they can really write. And I think because we, you know, because the book has a tendency to be, like, it's also a book that's about advocacy. It's a book about, you know, communal change, and it's a book about important political issues. Yeah. But it's also a really beautiful book. Yeah. And like, I really hope that this time, and, you know, forevermore, like, people look at it and go, wow, what a nice poem that was. Yeah. People are writing from such a rich place, you know, and have grown, and it's just, it's a good opportunity to read a really good book. Yeah.
I don't have that much more to add, other than, I guess, what hopes do I have for it? I think just more. I would love to see, you know, for example, the contributors in this book go on to produce their own, go on to, you know, do their own art exhibitions, create their own. Some of them already have, you know, created their own community groups and reading groups. And, you know, we were talking about how the students at Edinburgh put on a play based on this book. I want to see this book grow and multiply and amplify and take on new shape, and be transformed by the people who hold it in their hands. You know, like we said, this has never been about us. It's always been collaborative. And, you know, this book will be very different in the hands of somebody, you know, living in Derby who's from a Sikh background than it will be in our hands. And that's what it's supposed to be. This is not meant to be the be all and end all on race and mental health. And I would love to see it continue to take on a life of its own. And I would like, honestly, for it to, I guess, it sounds really bad. As a publishing, it's great that it's unique, but I would like for it to not be so unique in the years to come. And I'd like for it to not be such a novelty. It's nice being one of the first, but I think that's ultimately what we want to see. And I think we're on our way there. I think for me, I think one of the most powerful things about editing this book has been the people we've worked with and contributors that we've gotten to know and seen their journeys, and then seeing them get to know each other. Honestly, has been one of the most powerful things, and I want to see more. I want to see it grow.
Really glad that you mentioned that in terms of more, because it's not like we haven't had those things as well. Like we're so proud of it and happy of it in both of its iterations, and it's very much about like just more of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to quickly come back to something you just said, Rianna, about how when you were thinking about the index and that the stress around that, and I'm interested to know how reading these pieces, editing these pieces, editing that book, that is a lot of emotional energy. How did you both cope with that or manage that? Okay.
Well, the first time round, thankfully, I was in therapy, and my therapist probably knew a lot more about the book than she was maybe supposed to. I don't know how these things work, but you know, it is hard. It is hard when you care about the people behind the stories and the experiences that you are crafting and creating. And yeah, therapy helped me get through that. This time round, I'm not in therapy. I tried to remember everything Sandra told me. Thank you, Sandra. No, but it's hard. But I think what has made it possible is the fact that we've been doing this together. And when I was struggling, I could lean on Ree and be like, look, I can't read this piece. It's actually too much. And I want you to take over. Can you please do that? And having that relationship and having that shoulder to lean on has made this possible. And I don't know if I would have been able to do it on my own, because it's a very heavy weight to carry, especially if your mental health is not great at that time as well. And yeah, I'm very grateful to be able to work with Rianna on this.
Absolutely the same. There's literally no way, especially this time around, because I'm in my final year of PhD. So Samara had to pick up a lot of slack at like a certain point in the year. And, you know, because we've done it before together, we both know exactly where our strengths lie. And like, we're a really good team. Like, it's just like, you know, the stuff that I love doing, Samara doesn't like doing, and vice versa, which is like super convenient. It's actually very convenient. It's very efficient. She puts all the spreadsheets together, and then I like talk to everyone. And it's just, yeah, that's how we do it. It's very, very, very good. It's super efficient. But like, you know, beyond that as well, like, we are both fortunate enough, and again, this comes back to our privilege, that we had therapy and have therapy, and both of us give our therapists shout outs in the dedication. Thank you, Gloria. So it's the sort of thing like where you know, the exact same thing that made us perfect to do this book, that we are people with lived experience of these issues, and, you know, straddle that service user practitioner line, is exactly what made it so difficult to do, you know. But like, thankfully, honestly, everyone's been so nice to us, and we've been so nice to each other. Like, I think like, even just like, oh, I'm terrible with like, I need a lot of gentleness in my life. I need people to be very nice to me all the time. And if I just think like, there's so many times where like, if it hadn't been for the support of our community, and okay, I cannot be here without saying that, like, if it had not been for Lighthouse Books and Myri in particular, this would never have happened. Absolutely not. It would have been dead in the water. Just because, like, you know, with the broad allusion to everything that happened, like, immediately before anyone else did, like, Myri really stepped up and like gave us all the contacts that we needed, and like supported us even financially with like getting the Society of Authors membership, and all of the sort of like legal help that the people we needed to talk to, just looking after us, just being really, you know, like that kind of like gentleness and community care, and like that project of deep love is what pulls this book together. Like, to me, that is like a key part of my like Black feminist ethic. And I think that, you know, without that praxis being able to underline the book, without that deep love that Samara and I have for each other as well. There's just no way it would have worked. And that's the only thing that made the project bearable and doable. Like, there's no way to be clinical about this kind of work. There's no way to distance yourself from this kind of work, because we are all so deeply invested in it that it had to be exactly like this for it to work.
Yeah, thank you. I can't even say, I don't even know what to say to that, because it was just so beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, no, it is. And yeah, and to just think like the care that has rippled out, that like almost it's holding this book, like, yeah, that community care is really, really special from so many people. I'm not going to ask you any more questions. I'm going to hope the audience may want to ask some questions. So if we do,
we have some online.
Oh, do
so
you?
If you want to put your thinking caps on, we can ask them. You think we'll do one, then the next.
Cool.
I'm going to knock something over.
Okay.
So you can repeat the question
Okay.
for me. Charlie asks, how did people respond to the first book? Were any of those responses surprising? And will you navigate feedback differently now that you have a second chance at it?
Did you?
We did.
Sorry. Yeah, Charlie asked. As soon as you said repeat it, my mind just went blank. I'm so sorry.
Charlie asked about the process of being able to repeat the book and how we navigated feedback after following the first edition.
And was feedback surprising?
And was any of the feedback surprising? So one of the things that I think we, like an example of how we navigated that feedback was that index question, right? Like there was, again, because Samara and I did quite a lot of the back end stuff of the first book, I think, you know, not to justify or anything, but, you know, that's the sort of thing that we missed. And we were so new to the game as well. Didn't even, you know, we had no idea what we were doing. Like, let's keep it a buck. And you know, so it was this, you know, certain things that a publisher needs to do for you, we did not know how to do. We were just readers who suddenly wanted to be editors, right? So like that exact sort of thing, like thinking about being, you know, being older as well and having more experience in thinking about accessibility, and, you know, myself now being like a teacher and all that sort of thing, like means that a lot of the practical issues that go into, you know, the creation of a book has been there. But yeah, being able to hear that feedback and incorporate it was amazing. Like, I think no one really gets a second shot at it like that. Like, I don't think that many people get to revisit their first book twice. And at first I was like, wow, I'm doing the same book at the start and end of my PhD. That's not ideal. That's not the PhD. That's the book I should be writing. That's the book I'm supposed to be writing. But like, at the same time, now it's done, I can look back at it and go, wow, I'm like really lucky to, you know, like even just stuff like when I would be reading my favorite, or like whatever choice I'd pick to read at like an event or something, and I'd notice like, oh, that didn't get picked up in the proofread, and like being able to go back and do that has been so satisfying. So this time round, we were both very particular about. We just felt like we had so much more creative control because we had so much more time and so much more support. So even down to things like that you wouldn't even expect. Like, I didn't know that you were allowed to pick the color of this page. So I got to pick that color and I was like, yeah, it's going to be teal, one of my favorite colors. Absolutely. Let's do that. You know, like things like that, things like saying, oh, I would like for this to be, you know, because I am, what are we, Gen? Because I'm a millennial. Yes. Because I'm a millennial, I like to write all things in lowercase. So like on the front cover, it initially said a groundbreaking collection, and also like it said a groundbreaking collection edited by Samara, and it was in title case, and I was like, oh no, that's not right. That's gonna have to be lowercase. You know, just silly things like that. Being able to say, I'm sorry. The email chain, oh my god, I'm surprised you let me do this. Like, honestly, I'm constantly surprised by the audacity that we were allowed to get away with. But you know, that sort of thing, being able to have that kind of creative control over, you know, things that might be considered minutiae, meant that like we now get to hold this and be like, yes. Like, in fact, I will probably deal with feedback and criticism very badly this time. So yeah, going forward, like, don't tell me anything. If you don't like it, just don't tell me.
Keep it to yourself. Yeah. And I think I would add regarding the feedback, I was surprised by how overwhelmingly positive the feedback was. Because, you know, the things we're talking about, let's be honest, a lot of people don't want to hear it. But I think the nature of this book is you're not going to pick it up unless you actually care. You know, it is a self-selecting audience in a way. And I think it meant that any of the kind of constructive feedback that we got, we were able to take on because it was offered because there was someone who read this and actually cared enough to let us know that they found this helpful or this less helpful. And I think it goes back to that community thing again, that it was a project of love. And then it meant that the feedback we got from it was from people who were coming from a place of care and compassion and solidarity. And we were able to use that in this edition. This time round, I mean, the reach is going to be way bigger, and it'd be interesting, I think, if people pick this book up because they've just heard about it and the kind of criticisms that they will, you know, offer now. But I think for me, I mean, when you're a Black woman walking through this world, people will be criticizing you for all sorts of nonsense. So I think as long as you know yourself and you know why you did what you did and you stand by what you did, you're going to take, you know, unwarranted criticism, like it's just going to like brush off your shoulder. It's not going to be that deep. I think for me, the criticism I'm looking out for is from the communities that I'm claiming to represent. And that's the feedback that matters to me the most. And that's the feedback that I'm gonna carry with me the most. If you're outside that community, thank you for supporting, blah, blah, blah. Keep your opinion, please. Keep buying the book, wrapping it and everything. But ultimately, I know that, you know, I'm here trying to represent a community of people who do not get heard. And their voices are the ones that I'm gonna be most attuned to.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So, yes.
Thank you for the book and thank you for the conversation as well. We'd love to have an audiobook if that is an option. I wanted to ask you to say a little bit more about the activism linked to the book.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we do, I think we do a fairly summative list in the, do we? Did I? I think we did a fairly summative list in there. So like, you can definitely double check all of the organizations I'm about to mention. But so some of the things we were 2 of 13 collaborators on a global research project, which was Cactus Global. It was like a global survey of researchers and academics to talk about, you know, their mental health in different. We also are working with an NHS research project called Project Neon, which is the narrative experiences online. And they contacted us back in 2017, and we've been on their lived experience advisory panel and active collaborators in like co-writing papers ever since. And that project is it's a digital project, which is right up my street. My PhD's in digital media and things like that. So it's basically, we allowed them, with the permission of our contributors, of course, to publish certain pieces from the book. And basically the way it works is it's a research trial to look into the usage of lived experience, personal recovery narratives as an aid in mental health support. So basically, as a user of this project, it's still in trials. So I think trials are finishing now, so maybe it'll be rolled out soon. But basically the idea is that you answer lots of questions about yourself, and then it matches you with a narrative, not just from us, but from lots of different places, that is most likely to be of use and service to you. And it's like, you know, an additional support to certain services. We've also worked with, I think I mentioned, we've worked with Nightline. We've been invited to their annual conference to work with them, thinking about service provision. And there's more. What else? Oh yeah, lots of talks, lots of grassroots conferences and workshops. We've also done there's copies of the book in NHS libraries, on wards as well, which was really important to us. People, and also not just like us doing things with it, other people have taken it and done stuff. So it's like, you know, being, you know, the Edinburgh students making the play, and then also people take, I think we were taught, oh yeah, it's on university reading lists as well. That was a good one, because like the idea is that we want for it to not just reach the people who need it in terms of seeing themselves reflected in it, but also to be in the hands of people making policy decisions, and also in the hands of people who are on their way to being service like practitioners. And like, thankfully, we've been able to do all of those things. Oh yeah, also the Healthy Brains Global Initiative, I sit on that as well. That's a massive research global organization that thinks about where like large pots of funding go into, and where, you know, which sort of like, yeah, where pots of funding are put in terms of mental health research. There's probably more, but it's in the book and I can't remember them right now. I'm sorry. It's been a busy few years.
I've got another online one that's a good follow-up, and then one more of you. Yeah. So online, Tan asked, if you could put the book in the hands of one powerful person and know that they would read it, who would that be?
I mean, I'm gonna do it. I think like in terms of the powerful person thing, like I'm aware that that's important. Like I literally just said the whole like policy versus but like I don't know, because I just don't trust anyone. So you know what I mean? Like I could put it in their hands, but would they? You know, I don't know. Give it to Jazza. I mean, like, yeah, I know you're laughing, but I think it's, you know, anyone can read a book. It doesn't mean they're going to be touched by it. It doesn't mean they're going to be moved by it. But I think what I would like is that if there is someone in a position of power who needs a resource, who needs something to say, this is what people are going through, that they can use it. So yeah, Jessa, why not? The Welcome Collection, we work with them loads. Yeah. So I think it's more like, you know, we can give it to the PM. Will that make a difference? Who knows? We can only pray. But I think it's the fact that for the people who are trying to advocate for us, that they have this resource. And I think that's the key thing for us.
Audience, there was one here. Yeah.
So I've got a really quiet voice, so I'm just going to shriek from the back. But I'm a medical student. Wow. And Samara, I guess I kind of like became familiar with your work through a piece you wrote on differential attainment, and having written like a wee research project focusing on like differential attainment in psychiatry exams in particular. I was wondering if you might speak a wee bit more on, you know, how we might navigate not only like the whitewashing of narratives and experiences of mental health, but of service provision itself.
Could you repeat the question?
I will repeat the question because it was a brilliant question. In summary, you're asking about, so I have done some work on differential attainment and differential attainment among practitioners and doctors, but also psychiatrists as well. So for those of you who aren't super familiar with how medicine and stuff works, you need to do a lot of exams. And to get certain jobs, you need to do more exams and do very well on them. And pretty much across the board to specialize in psychiatry or cardiology or anything like that, we see that if you are white, you're more likely to do better on those exams than if you are any other ethnic group. Psychiatry is no exception. And there are loads and loads of reasons for this differential attainment. We see it actually across higher education, so in universities more generally. So it's part of a bigger issue of, you know, why are people of color, why are they not thriving in these institutions? I mean, they're not really created for us, so that's kind of one reason. You know, the medical institution is no exception. And there are lots and lots of reasons. I mean, if you want, I can just, I guess you can read the article because I went into it in quite a lot of detail. But, you know, the culture of these institutions is a huge problem. The fact that even getting access to the kind of right experience that you need and the research opportunities that you need, it depends on who you know. And if you're kind of working in a kind of old boys club kind of environment, that's going to benefit certain people over others. So yeah, I think in terms of service provision, the reason this is important is that if you're not going to score well in your exams, you're not going to get the job. So if the same kind of people are getting jobs as psychiatrists, the same people getting jobs as clinical psychologists, the people who you go to when you're in your most vulnerable states
are already a small group of privileged people who are probably quite detached from your experience. And I think that's why, even though it can seem quite removed from what we're talking about today, even something as simple as differential attainment is huge, and it's hugely important for shaping how we then experience the services that we enter. I think, was the question like, what do we do about it? What was the question?
Yeah, I guess kind of coming from a place where you sort of platform and collecting a lot of really important narratives and bringing them to the fore. Like, I guess it's like, well, what the heck are we going to do when, as you say, this sort of tiny privileged white minority? I remember reading one article where they were sort of saying that, you know, white UK psychiatrists were like more likely than anybody else to say that like they're the most oppressed or whatever, and I'm just like,
okay,
if that's your only channel of accessing.
So in summary, you're asking like, what do we do when the situation is so dire? I've got two approaches, and I'm going to pass on to Ree because I know she has a few things as well. One approach is to obviously try and diversify the workforce. So we've got, there's Association of Black Psychiatrists. There is the, you can give more details. There's the Black and Asian and African Therapist Network. There are a lot of kind of grassroots groups of, people in these fields who are working to increase recruitment and to mentor those who are coming up and make sure that they have the experience, the contacts, the know-how to get into these positions. There's also issues of retainment. So, once you get these positions, I'm speaking as someone who left medicine, I apologize. But, how do we get these people once they're there to actually stay and thrive in those spaces? So there are groups, often the people who are already struggling the most and already, are battling institutional everything, who are taking it upon themselves to use their free time, their free resources to kind of invest back into their community to change these issues. So that's kind of one side of things. And the other side of things is finding support outside of these institutions, which again, marginalized communities have been doing for eons and will continue to do, because we can't all afford to wait for these changes to take place in these big institutions, and we need help now. And there's organizations, for example, the first that comes to mind for me, I'm from South London, Black Thrive. They have been working within their community to provide that support that people can't get from institutions. So there's kind of that two-pronged approach, that while we wait for things to change in these big institutions, how do we support our communities on the ground? And unfortunately, the people who are most vulnerable are the ones who are doing the most work. And I think those of us who are in more privileged positions, us using our privilege and our resources to actually support them and to fund them and to empower them to do the great work they're doing is really important.
I don't have much to add to that. I just wanted to maybe like name drop and go into some of the things that Samara was talking about. So the BABCP is the accreditation of like BAME psychiatrists that we were talking about, and they have a really great practice guide that I'm always recommending. So they have a short version and a long version, and it's got a really long acronym. It's the BABCP practice guide. Yeah, and there's a short report and there's a really long report, and it's basically all of these BAME psychotherapists who come together to create this this wicked practice guide that has all of these different recommendations, like short-term and long-term recommendations for improving services in areas that, because like as Samara always says, the people who are using these services are disproportionately BAME people, and then they're constructed within systems that are not, intended for our use. So they're a really great place to start. There's also, of course, the BAATN, which the Black African Asian Therapy Network. Yeah, exactly. And that's also, even in Edinburgh, something that was like really, really useful for me was Sahelia. So they have a, again, I think it's women of color. So it's like down in Leith, and that was like, really wonderful, and that's free therapy. When I went there was no like cap on how many times you could use it as well. It's there are like grassroots organizations that are doing this kind of work already, so we have to like be aware that our approach has to be double pronged. It's either, as Samara's mentioned, there's also like, you did mention that this is something that's like definitely mirrored across higher education, and I just automatically was thinking about what we once called the BAME attainment gap, but now we call the awarding gap, because attainment that's loaded already. And, you know, the sorts of things that different institutions like universities are doing to challenge that, all of the different sort of, and like it reminds, because I have one such initiative myself, the Project Myopia, that's about decolonizing academia. And, you know, we focus on the three things, like how, you know, thinking about what is being taught, how is it being taught, what are we doing about pedagogy, and then also the culture of the space. And those sorts of things always happen. You know, there's this great tension between requiring institutional funding and support to make that happen, but then making sure that you're doing all the work that basically doesn't really need any, it runs outside of the institution, and long may it, you know. So there's this real tension between these two things, and it's not always very easily solved, you know, like Samara has left medicine. Like it's the kind of thing where, you know, you might have the best intentions, but we also have to make sure that we're supporting the people who have been doing that work for a really long time. You know, often like universities like to turn around and go, oh, here's what we've done, and then list all the people who've been doing all these things for ages. And meanwhile, they're like, you know, gasping on their knee, you know, needing this support, the financial and the like, you know, all the kinds of support. So it's just a really like complicated situation, but people are on the ground doing it. So you can never look to the institution to help you first, basically. Yeah, that's a good place. Thank you.
I think there's time for one last burning question, if there is one. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear?
Can you speak up a little? Good luck.
I take this back?
Yeah, or I can run it through.
Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'll just start again. Yes, I'm also a medical student and I'm a first year. And I think when I came into my degree, I was like, yes, like I'm gonna try and do so much change, and like just very naive. And I think, yeah, I'm just kind of asking what advice you would give me or someone in my position who wants to see this change and has like a clear idea of what the change should look like. You just face so much resistance from the people who are meant to be making it. Yeah.
I'll go first as the ex-Edinburgh, the Edinburgh alumni. I think I didn't. I think being in Edinburgh at this university can be kind of exhausting as a person of colour, as I'm sure I don't really have to say. But I think one of the things that I did, like I found that, well, first of all, when I was here, there were a lot less BME people when I was here. So it was a large part of it for me was being, and I think this is probably why I ended up doing the work that I do now. Like a lot of it was about being in digital spaces and like being able to find that community wherever I could find it, essentially. So like that's certainly one thing I'd say, like, you know, being part of the BAME group and all of that. Like often, like there are things that tend to happen that like start to foment in those spaces. Like I'm thinking about when we put on the Resisting Whiteness conference a few years back, and you know, there's lots of things that we ended up doing, like just by nature, you know, like we would go to all of the university things and, you know, kick up a fuss. But at the same time, I also want to immediately say that you must not let them take your energy from you, because that work will continue long after you pass out of the university. They constantly, you know, there's these constant 4-year cycles where, like, you know, a student starts something and then they leave in 4 years and then it sort of starts again from, you know, and I'm like really tired of seeing people lost to it. So where possible, try and join initiatives that already exist. Don't, like, if you can avoid it, don't start something new. Just because, like, it all plays into, you know, things need to pass on into other people's hands for it to have a chance at, you know. So I'd say this to you, like, as you're right at the beginning, that's something I would definitely recommend, because otherwise, like, the amount of time that it takes to get a university to take you seriously as well is really long. Like, I started a project here when I was in my last year and got, university funding to do it and so on. And like, it's been 5 years and now we're just about being, like now they're inviting us back. Like when they treated us like crap when we were here, I had all these meetings with, the staff here and stuff like that. And they were like, oh, Project Myopia, and and they were really not very gracious about us at all. And now I'm hired multiple times a year to come and give workshops to them. The same department that, was trying to squash it from the beginning. It takes so long to get to that point. Like it's taken 5 years to be asked back and, and 5 years and almost a PhD, so like they can't ignore you kind of thing. And it's just not worth it. And I think that there's a real, like there's a real tendency for this labor to be made invisible and carried out by the most marginalized. And I think that that is one of the things that contributes the most to the awarding gap. The fact that you have to do all of this work just to make the university habitable for you. And, I would just love to be able to say to people that they also need to take time to rest, and it's hard to rest in a space that's hostile. But, if that means finding grassroots spaces and places that you can rest, don't pour all of yourself into fixing this space. Like it will reject it. It's been standing longer than you have and that you can. So, do what you can and then rest. You want to say
something? Echoing so much of what Rihanna said. I studied at Cambridge, so I too know the struggle of doing medicine in these kind of institutions. I'm going to echo rest. I did too much, if I'm perfectly honest. I did too much and I felt like I had to. And similarly, these problems existed before I arrived and they exist now. You can do your parts, but you can't take it upon yourself to change hundreds of years worth of problems. So you can do your parts, and I think rest in the knowledge that there will be others who will do their part too. And I will also just add, find community where you can. I'm going to shout out Ada. She's at the back there, looking uncomfortable in red. And when I was a first year medic, Ada, we're one of the only Black people in our college, like we can count on one hand. And Ada fed me. She cooked me food and she fed me. And we would sit and we would watch, I don't know, some random Nollywood. I don't know what we were watching back in the day. But Ada provided community for me in that small act of kindness that I don't know how I would have survived first year without it. And I think, those people are rare, but when you can find them, hold on to them, because those are the things that will get you through like the trash that can be these institutions. So, join organizations, join in with the work that's going on, but rest and find your people. Search for your people, find them and hold on to them, because you need it. And it will make it worthwhile. And look, she's still here now all these years later. So, we did good.
So I will quickly jump onto that because I also studied at Edinburgh and was the only Black person, one of like 3 Black people in my course. And I think as well as a Scottish student, I found it very difficult. And I would just want to echo what you've both said, and also say that what I wish someone had told me was you have to go and find those people as well. You have to go and find that community and be brave about it. Because I think I was just very shy and didn't really have the language to understand what I was experiencing, partly because I'd also just experienced it my whole life growing up in Edinburgh. And so I think be brave and push yourself and reach out to those people and find them, because they are more than definitely looking for the same thing. Yeah, that's it.
Lighthouse Books is a good place to start.
Yeah. Just stay here all the time.
Just stay here all the time. That's what cool kids are.
I think that's us. We can't take any more questions. It's getting cold. It might rain. You have books to sign. People have books to buy as well. I want to say a huge thank you to both of you And congratulations again. And yeah, just thank you, congratulations, well done.